Alright, today we're going to be tearing into a 1984 Yamaha Tri Moto 200. We're going to start by pulling the head off, the cylinder, recoil, stator, flywheel, drive assembly here, output shaft, the clutches there, and then go ahead and split the crankcase. So we're going to go ahead and pull the tensioner out, and the reason why we do that first is because there's quite a bit of tension on this tensioner. If we were to just go and remove that the cylinder head there, we could potentially break that or slip or something. So we want to make sure this is loose. And I just pulled that cap off of there, and then you take a 10mm wrench and at least loosen this. I would pull it all the way out because we're going to eventually, and that'll loosen up the cam chain, and there won't be as much pressure on there to pull this cam chain sprocket there. So got a 17mm to remove this sprocket. I kind of put my thumb on it there just to keep it from sliding all over the place. You can just take 2 fingers in and pull that sprocket off of there. I like to kind of set my chain down there. Well, eventually we'll let it fall, but for now we'll keep it held up. We've got a couple Allens down here, and then we've got some 12mm on top here that we'll have to pull before that head comes off. These will all be torqued down before while you're going back together. There are 2 Allens over here on the cam chain side. Alright, we'll go ahead and remove both of those then. We don't have to pull these valve inspection covers, the valve clearance check covers, to remove this head. Some models will have a bolt down in there, but this year and model does not. So these bolts are out. We'll go ahead and loosen the other 2. Got brass washers. You want to make sure you keep track of those going back together. So that should be it for as far as bolts holding this head on. And I find a good spot here. You don't want to pry on any fins that are going to break. You don't want to pry at all. A lot of times you got to do it just to get that out. And then here's your head here. Actually, really good condition. We got that cam that will just stay in there. And to pull that, you got 2 10mm right there, and then you'll have to kind of work it out of there with the rockers. So we'll just leave that cam in there for now. Put this back on there to keep it all together. We've got 2 more Allens holding this cylinder on. If you watch on previous videos, you'll see us. We've got to do a video on a carb clean on this model. We do a maintenance and a service, adjusting valves on this one. So several different videos you can watch on different things you'll end up doing on these Tri Motos if you have them very long. And this one will be a rebuild video. 2 Allens here. These again will be torqued going back together. This is what you call your head gasket here. Below the cylinder is your base gasket. And the guide here, one of them is able to pull up and out of it now. The other one we'll have to remove once we get the stator off. But there's your cylinder there. Inspect it really good. Make sure there's no grooving, no scoring. Inspect your piston really good. The way you remove this piston, I like to take a small screwdriver or a pick, and I'll go in the circlip spot, there's a groove for you to get something in there, and then I put my finger over top so it doesn't go flying. And then just kind of work that circlip out. And that's the circlip there. Then you can take your other hand there and push the pin out. Sometimes they're a bit of a challenge to get out. You can tap them with a screwdriver or something, but you want to make sure you don't put a lot of pressure on that crank and bind that crank up. Also, you want to make sure you don't damage the pin if you plan on reusing it. To put that circlip back in, just take the open end, kind of shove it down into its groove there, and then this pin's not on this model isn't extremely tight, but take your screwdriver then, a small screwdriver or a pick, and get it in there and kind of just pry it in like that, and it'll snap right into place there. That cam chain ended up falling down in there, which is okay, but just want to make sure you don't turn that motor over, or that could potentially break that case. I'm going to take a block and put it underneath this motor here so you guys can see what we're doing. But we're going to remove this stator cover here, the recoil first of all, and then the stator cover with the stator and the flywheel in behind it. So let's see, 2, 4, 6 Allen bolts to remove this cover. We just have a couple of them. I loosened several of them up already just to move things along quicker for you. And then we've got your recoil cup here. What happens is you pull that recoil and these arms go out, and you do it when it's going fast, but these arms will pop out and grab a hold of these and spin that motor over. So that's how a recoil works. So if your recoil is not working, more than likely your rope broke or something, but sometimes these gears or these arms here get broke off or worn down. This is a 17 millimeter to remove this. And this is one of the times you want to hold this so that your motor doesn't turn over, so that your cam chain doesn't break your case. So if you spin that over, your cam chain will spin as well, and could potentially cause some major damage. Got the recoil cup off of there now. And we've got your flywheel. Now this is a challenge for a lot of people. And what I like to do, grab a screwdriver. This is a number 3 screwdriver. You don't want to go smaller than that, but you can take these and just tap on them. And what I like to do is turn them, and you can turn them. I'll do it on this screw here where maybe you can see a little bit better. You turn them, find the spot where it sits down in that screw and tap it just to kind of clean it out good. Then I take my screwdriver and I'll turn it like a 1/16 of a turn, and so it's not seated completely down in there. And then I'll take and slam on it. What that's doing is forcing that screw to either turn into place, turn in where the screwdriver is, or kind of just break free from where it's at. So that's how I got all these out. And you can use an impact driver like this, except for these are clear down inside there, and you can't get an impact driver on there. So I was able to loosen all these up by doing that little trick with this number 3 screwdriver. You want to make sure you use a number 3 though, not your regular number 2, because you want to make sure that it's completely filled up these Phillips heads. All right, those are out there, and then we had a couple around the outside here that we pulled. You want to make sure you don't tap on these where these bolts go in. They will break off very easily. I just kind of tapped on the case itself, and not even very hard, but enough to break that seal free. And then this is going to be magnetic inside there, so it can be a little bit of a challenge to get apart there. We've got your stator right here, got your pulser over here, and to buy this from Yamaha, you can buy this entire assembly here, and you just have to pull these 3 Phillips here to get this out. That wire kind of runs underneath and comes out here. You want to make sure you replace this gasket, because more than likely you'll rip it getting it off if this motor is sat for any amount of time at all. And it has, because it's a 1984. We've got your flywheel here, and I'll show you how to remove that. Here's your idler gear. And what happens is your you push your starter button, it engages your starter drive, which engages this gear, which turns your flywheel gear, and that turns the motor over. So if this gear goes bad, these teeth get worn off, or it's not spinning freely, it won't be turning your your flywheel over in your starter gear behind here, so it won't be turning your motor over. A lot of times the teeth on the starter wear bad, or the idler gear, or the teeth behind the flywheel there. So to pull this flywheel then, you've got to have a puller like you can see here. And what you do then is spin this on here. I've got this, and I like to take a bolt, and your cam sprocket bolt fits right down in there. And you could also use your recoil pull starter bolt, which was here. It's just longer. So I've got that on there. Then what I do is I take some old bolts, the same ones actually as the Tri Moto uses for the head bolts, but these are not off of this Tri Moto, because, and you don't really want to use the ones off of your Tri Moto, because, unless you're going to get new ones, because a lot of times it'll tweak these enough to where you don't really want to reuse them again to go clear down the head. These are not a bolt that you want to break off inside the head. So these are exceptionally long, and they certainly don't need to be this long, but we didn't have any other bolt that was long enough that was any shorter. So make sure these go all the way down, and then you take this. In this case, it's a 19 millimeter. You want to make sure that you're straight with that. What I've done before too is put a junk socket on there, and that kind of holds it in the center there. Now you just spin this, and you could hear it pop off of there. That means it's loose. I always like to take and grab it, pull on it just to make sure it's completely loose before I take this puller apart here. And that doesn't take much. If it's pretty rusty inside there. Sometimes what I do is take and leave that socket on the end of it, and just do one, after I put pressure on that puller, take a socket and just kind of slam on the end of that puller there, and a lot of times it'll pop free. I've never ever been able to not get one off hitting the end of the puller with a hammer. Again, holding your flywheel so the motor doesn't turn over. We'll take and put that puller away now, because we will not need that anymore on this machine. All right, now we've got that flywheel loosened up, and you just take it and lift it off of there. Now it's got one-way bearing in behind here, and what that does is there's a ball and a spring, and kind of a round cylinder and a spring, and when that starter is engaged, it'll turn one way. It's a one-way gear, so it'll turn one way and engage that motor, and then as soon as that motor's spinning on its own, it will disengage that one-way gear. We've got a keeper here that will hold your starter gear into place. Make sure we remove that. That's crucial to have on there, otherwise your flywheel and starter gear is all going to spin at the same time. So down in there we've got two 10 millimeter bolts holding that cam chain guide on. And there's your last guide there. Make sure there's no damage in there. Now if you can see here, this is what I was talking about. If you spin this motor over, a lot of times you'll break this guide holder here, and if that happens, this crankcase is may as well be thrown in the trash. So you're going to make sure that that cam chain doesn't turn over and bind up in there when you're rebuilding this motor. So we'll keep this cam chain with the guides there, and we will remove this cover here, 6 Allens to remove this, and then a couple bolts from this other side here. Alright, that cover's off there, and then we can take this, pull this out. This is your output here. This is a transfer gear, so it's transferring your gears running side to side when you're sitting on the three-wheeler, and taking it and running it to the back drive. If you've got a chain model, drive chain model, you'll have a sprocket right here, and that sprocket, there's no need for this transfer gear, because that sprocket's going to come right out, teeth are going to be on it, headed to the back. So this nut here, if you can see, it's kind of a bad angle for you, but we'll have an area that's bent over, and that's to keep that gear from spinning while you're going somewhere. Spinning off. This is a 22 millimeter. And this sometimes can be a challenge to hold while you are removing it. And you want to make sure if you're using anything to hold it that you are not going to let it spin. That's the worst thing that you can do, is let it spin. So you want to know which direction you're heading, kind of find a spot on here that's not going to break loose, and spin. See how securely we held that? And pliers generally aren't going to be able to do that because you're kind of at a weird angle with pliers. You don't have a lot to grab onto, and you don't want to damage these gears. So I like to use something big like this pry bar here and just wedge it in there so there's no chance that it'll spin. We've got a sensor down below here. It's a 14 millimeter to remove. And then your gear selector here is a 10 millimeter to remove it off this pivot. This crankcase is held together with a bunch of Phillips screws, which are a huge pain to get apart after this many years. It used to be a pretty common deal to use these Phillips, and now hardly anybody uses Phillips for engine case bolts because they are such a big challenge to get off. So we've got your shift arm here with your linkages and your tie rod in. And we've got your oil drain plug down there. Probably hard to see it from here, but 17 millimeter. And these are pretty common for these to go bad because they're just a big plug. This is actually damaged on the back side. We'll see if we can get this out this way. If not, I'll show you a little trick to getting it out. Yeah, it's going to round off right away. So what we can do, and I'll show you on the next video, is take a chisel and loosen that up. And I'll show you how to do that. It'll destroy the plug, but your plug is already destroyed if you can't get it out with a socket. So, and you can buy them fairly reasonable from Yamaha. We'll flip this motor over here and remove the clutches. We'll have some oil drain out here. I don't think it was all drained. And gas, I guess. All right. So I see we have the starter hot wire still on here. We'll do 10 millimeter to remove that. And then do the same thing with these, just like I told you with removing screws that are tough to get out. These, I think I loosened all of them so that you wouldn't have to watch me fight removing all of these. So I loosened all of them, but I'll go ahead now and remove them. Oil filter cover here. Bolts are out. Okay, now what I'm going to show you, we're going to adjust the clutch on this Tri Moto 200, and you've got to take a 14 millimeter wrench and, a 12 millimeter wrench. Okay, so adjusting this clutch on the Yamaha 200, you take a 12 millimeter wrench, and it looks like somebody's already done a little bit of damage to this lock nut here, but it shouldn't be, no need for it to be extremely tight. So get it loose and then take a flat screwdriver. If your three-wheeler is continuing to lurch forward after you're put it in gear, and if your idle's where it needs to be and it's still continuing to lurch forward, or you've really got to hit the gas to get going, you can adjust it right here. Now what you do is, should be fairly easy to spin back and forth because you're not really putting any pressure on anything, but what you want to do is turn it in until you find that pressure. And then once you find that pressure, stop and you back it out about a quarter turn or an eighth of a turn, and then loosen and then tighten that lock down. What that's doing is getting your clutch to where it releases where it needs to go at the time that it needs to release, and engages when it's supposed to. So go ahead and tighten that back up and then try it then. You can do this while the three-wheeler is even running, and adjust this and see if that works a lot better for you. Then we've got all these bolts off here. And then your oil filter cover here has got 3 Allens that we'll remove, and these are a specialty bolt, a specific bolt for this filter cover, and it centers this cover. And this one I think is the only specific one. Some of the Yamaha Tri Motos, they'll have an adapter behind this. This just has a cover, so those adapters aren't cheap, so this is a better way of doing it. Problem is, if you damage it behind here, you got to replace this whole cover, but it's not very common to see a damaged clutch cover. There is your oil filter there. You can see we have some fuel in there. This is a specialty bolt here, so make sure you go in that one with the right one. It just slides clear down in there farther. So we've got all those bolts off, and we don't have to remove this cover and those bolts. One thing you don't want to do is take and use your hammer and bang right there. What I do is same thing as I did on the stator cover, just kind of tap it anywhere, and I'm putting pressure, pulling out, and then tapping on it, and that's generally enough to break that seal and allows you to remove the case. I think this model you might have to remove the dipstick because sometimes they put that in behind the gear. So we've got a filthy motor here. They had a lot of gas down in their motor, so it had been sitting for quite a while. We've got the centrifugal clutch here, we've got the inner pack and the outer housing, and then our drive clutch here. And that's got your friction plates and your steel plates. Starter